Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Talking with Pastor. I am truly honored to have my guest on this afternoon. He has been a true brother. We grew up together, and he's just been very profound in what his call and what his mission is for. And he's just been a phenomenal preacher. He's been a phenomenal entrepreneur, and he's just been touching a lot of lives in a lot of places around the world. So I'd like to introduce to you uh, Reverend Nicholas Richards. It is a pleasure to have you on my show this afternoon. I thank God for you, man, and I just say that, man, it's been a long time since we've seen each other, and I'm so blessed that you're here today to just be able to bless us.
Thank you so much. I love you, Thaddeus, and it's just good to see you. I'm really excited to be on your show. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking.
So, in this series, man, I always talk to preachers and pastors, and, I want them to be very, transparent. So, tell us where you grew up, where you came from, and your education background, and etc.
Okay. So I was born in Jamaica, and then I came to the States when I was about 5 years old, and we relocated to the Bronx. So that's where you and I met early on. I lived in the Bronx forever, it feels like. So I lived in the Bronx all my adolescence, and was raised there, went to public school there. And I actually ended up going away for college to Atlanta. So I went to Morehouse in Atlanta, and I stayed at Morehouse. I graduated in 4 years. I stayed in Atlanta after Morehouse because I started grad school at Emory in Atlanta. And so I was studying to get an MDiv, so that I was thinking about maybe going to get a PhD as well. So I was really kind of on this track to be a professor. That's what I was really thinking I was going to do. I was interested in religion, but I didn't think I would pastor a church. I thought maybe I would teach in a seminary. That's what I was really kind of thinking about. And I ended up, of course, getting called into the ministry, really just in a roundabout way. It wasn't something I was thinking about doing. But when I was in seminary, I had to do an internship in a church as a part of my field work for seminary. And I did that field work in the church, and I just really kind of gravitated to being in the church. Even though you and I grew up in the church, it wasn't something I was thinking for myself professionally, you know? And so I was at Emory during my second years when I kind of really felt called to the ministry, and during my second year of grad school. And right around that time, right when I kind of started feeling my call into the ministry as a profession, I got an opportunity to come back to New York to serve at a church in Harlem called Abyssinian Baptist Church. So when I was at Emory, kind of just minding my business, got called to the ministry. And then right on top of that call, there was an opportunity to serve a church. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going back to New York. And so I came back to New York. I transferred schools from Emory to Union Theological Seminary. And so I ended up finishing seminary at Union and working in the church part-time. So kind of doing both things at once. So that's kind of my kind of educational background and kind of my moving around story. Yeah.
Very, very, very uh, determined I see you are when it comes to your education, and seeing how that is been a core component since we've grown up. That's something that's been something very important, that education is key, and that God had led you in that direction to be go into ministry, and that you've been a blessing to a lot of people, not just here in New York, but to abroad and even across this country. So what church are you serving at? Are you pastoring, or are you just associate minister there? And what contributions have you been able to give to the church that's actually in that community?
So, I stayed at Abyssinian for 8 years as a full-time associate pastor. So, Abyssinian is one of the few Black churches that are blessed to have like a professional staff that's there Monday through Friday. So, that's how I ate and fed myself. I had a full-time job at the church. So, I started that position at 23. I finished seminary and started full time at Abyssinian. So my day-to-day job was serving the church. So planning programs, preaching, teaching Bible study. It was a large congregation, so they needed a full-time staff. So I did that for about 8 years while I was at Abyssinian. Abyssinian, as you can imagine, is a strange name for a Black church.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from the former name of the country Ethiopia. Ethiopia used to be called Abyssinia
Mm.
about 200 years ago. So Abyssinian got its name because a group of Ethiopian sea merchants and Black folks started a church together in New York, and
Okay.
they called it Abyssinian. So right when I got there in about 2008, it was the church's 200th anniversary. And they were taking a pilgrimage back to Ethiopia. It was started by Ethiopian and Black folk in America. And at their 200th anniversary, the church was like, we want to go back to our roots in
Mm-hmm.
Abyssinia, in Ethiopia, Africa. So I got to the church at a really exciting time in terms of its own history and just all the buzz going on in the church, right? So it was a year-long anniversary. So you can imagine a lot of programming, a lot of like fanfare about, this amazing historic accomplishment to be 200 years old, right? So when I got there, they were going back to Ethiopia. I was still very, very new. I was an intern. I wasn't even like full-time staff member yet. So I couldn't go back to Ethiopia with them. I had to stay and like, get the mail at the church. So I was doing that. And when they took 200 people to Ethiopia. So you can imagine that's a big contingent of folk to travel at one time. So when those folk came back, they were like, we want to do something in Ethiopia. We don't want to just have like this symbolic connection. We want to do something. And so I was tasked with finding something for the church to do, right? They didn't want to just like build a well or something like piecemeal. They wanted to do something more established. So I came up with this idea along with the church to start a nonprofit in Ethiopia called Abyssinian Fund.
Mm.
And what we were going to do was we were going to really set up an office and raise money in America to build a nonprofit in Ethiopia named after the church. So we started this nonprofit. People from the church gave their money, contributed to it, and we set up a nonprofit in Ethiopia. And our mission was we were going to help small scale farmers in Ethiopia live a better quality of life. And so I went from like preaching and like doing Bible study to now thinking about like how are we going to help Ethiopia.
Okay.
So my transition in ministry really was like this like really kind of winding road from like traditional bread and butter, you're preaching, you're writing sermons, you're teaching, to now you're doing economic development work,
Mm.
right? The blessing of being an Abyssinian was you can kind of like do different things and it still be ministry, right?
Okay.
I know a lot of churches, sometimes ministry is only visiting the sick and doing funerals, right? At Abyssinian, I was able to see a broader definition of ministry. And so I was able to see that doing economic development work in a foreign country was ministry, right? Hiring people was ministry. All of these things that are not traditionally seen of as ministry, really for the Abyssinian church was really like, this is ministry. So we set up a nonprofit in Ethiopia and we raised a bunch of money to train farmers. So we had like a full-time staff of people in Ethiopia training coffee farmers. The reason we chose coffee was because coffee originates from Ethiopia.
Okay.
So the coffee bean initially is found in Ethiopia. So all the coffee in the world originates from Ethiopia. So it's one of those staple crops there. most of the folk who are employed are in the coffee industry, and so it was just like a no-brainer. So I was back and forth to Ethiopia for years while I was at Abyssinian. And
Okay.
so I did that for 8 years. I kind of managed both the international work and also was still preaching back in Harlem for 8 years, kind of back and forth. And about 5 years ago, so this is 2015, I was really thinking about what was next, right? I had been in Abyssinian for a while, right? Things were going well, but I think I just turned 30, and I was just kind of thinking about like, okay, well, what's the next move? You know, where does God want me to go? And I really became interested in technology, right? So I think one of the things that you'll see from like my own kind of like call to ministry is that it's a real like practical call, right? Like
Okay.
it's very like, what are you going to do? You know, I think I love preaching and I love like talking about Jesus, but I feel like this like real like basic need to do something, you know,
Mm.
like with like my hands and with my mind. So I started becoming really interested in technology. And I was kind of tired of traveling. I was traveling a whole lot, right? And I was like, I'm not sure I want to keep doing this back and forth to Africa and America thing. You know, I was never home. So I was like, okay, maybe it's some time for something else. And so I had been like thinking about some technology projects, right? Because Abyssinian was a really large church. But as a younger minister, I was thinking to myself, well, in 30 years, if I have a wife and kid, is the local church going to be able to like support that family in the way that it had been in the past, right? Because I was starting to see, I don't know if people are going to go to church in the same way in 30 years, like not today, right?
Okay.
But with the way technology is going, I kind of see a world where people will be able to go to church on their phones, right? Like, because you can do everything else on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I became really fascinated with the idea of like, what does it look like to build an Abyssinian on your phone, right? That's what I became really kind of fascinated with. And when I was kind of going through that process, it was clear that like I probably needed to do it on my own, right? That trying to experiment with that may not have like really worked within like the church context. So I took a leave and about 2015 to start a company that kind of merged religion and technology. And that company was called Roho.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm really focused on now is this like merger between religion and technology, right? And before COVID, everyone thought like that's a good idea, but we're not ready for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know, Rojo was going fine. We had built this website and we had a ton of religious content on this website. So you can like go get your sermon, get music, all on the Rojo website. And we were building it and things were going fine, but it was still kind of like the outlier, right? Like it was still like, yeah, people will go to Rojo, but they're still gonna go to church, right?
Okay.
People watch Rojo at their desk, but they're still gonna go to church. Then when COVID happened, it was like, there is no church to go to.
Mm.
And so we started at Rojo, we started getting a lot of calls from churches saying, hey, that Rojo thing that you built for yourself, can you come help me do something for my church?
Mm-hmm.
So we began consulting about a year and a half, 2 years ago. We began a consulting practice
Oh,
where we now help churches really build their online ministry.
okay.
So the thing that occupies most of my time nowadays is running our consulting business,
Okay.
um, which is to help churches build their virtual congregations.
Well, that's definitely something very impactful, I tell you, because of the fact that now that Corona has hit, and pandemic has taken over. Everybody has now switched to that Zoom church,
Right.
if that makes sense. And now that now it's seen more resourceful now to be on the internet, have your church on the internet and do service from there. Now it's more accepting into this society. No offense, due to a pandemic that has taken place.
Yeah.
But
Right.
Reverend Richards, let me ask you, where do you see the church going forward in this next century or this time? Where do you see us being able to share the gospel of Christ with people, not just here in New York, but abroad? Where do you see it going? What's your vision on this?
I think a couple of things. So my initial thoughts about Roho before Corona was that we would still keep growing. People would still want to go to church, maybe come on the Roho website or visit other religious websites and get like fillers through the week. Like if I'm going through something at my desk on a Tuesday, I can't really go to church, so I can go on the Roho website and get that and get some encouragement. But now with Corona, my thoughts have changed where, you know, something has happened where when you cannot go to a building for a year and a half, your relationship with that building has changed.
Mm,
When you cannot see your pastor for a year and a half, your relationship with that pastor has changed. It just has, right? So I think that there is going to be a democratization of who is a pastor, right? Right now, you are a pastor if you have a church, physical church building, and you look a certain way, you wear certain clothes, right? You wear a clerical collar and you dress in a black suit and stuff like that. But I feel that the disruption that's happened over the past year and a half have changed our relationships, right? If you have a friend and you haven't been able to see them for a year and a half, and a lot of your relationship was about y'all hanging out together physically, that relationship's changed. Not saying it's worse, but it's changed,
mm,
right? So the role of the minister used to be that the minister kind of spoke down to the people, right? And even when you go to church, the pulpit is raised, right? The pulpit's off the floor, right?
mm,
You step into the pulpit, right? So even the architecture of how church is designed is there is a hierarchy between the minister and the people.
mm,
But what happens in Zoom, right? What happens in Zoom is the preacher sitting down and he's talking to a mic, just like you are sitting down and you're listening.
mm,
So you're not looking up at the preacher any longer. And I know that that sounds like a small thing, but it's a huge thing, right? When you are no longer looking up at the preacher, but you're looking at the preacher directly, eye level, your relationship has changed. And what I feel is going to happen is that a lot more people are going to be able to pastor in a new way without a building, without a collar, without seminary. I think a lot more people are going to pastor. I think that after Corona, you're going to see a lot of people rush back to church. I think that will last for about a year or two, but I feel like our habits have permanently changed.
mm,
And so I see a world where um, there is going to be a democratization of religion, where you in your apartment will be able to pastor a community of people all around the world.
Mm.
And it may be 25 people, 100 people, but you will be their pastor. That's what I see happening. And I think the difficulty of that is going to be a continued breakdown of religious authority, right? So one of the benefits of structure is that you can make a lot of rules, right? So when when a pandemic comes about, you have to kind of like put those rules to the side because you just got to like stay alive,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's hard to bring those rules back after you've taken them off, right? Because think about how many preachers and pastors said, you better not stay home and go to Bedside Baptist, right? You better come to church, right? Now Bedside Baptist is the only church you have. So the pastor who used to say, don't go to Bedside Baptist is saying, make sure you log on from your bedroom. It's going to be hard to go back and say, don't go to Bedside Baptist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm more interested in the breakdown of that relationship than I am in saying, this is what's going to happen,
Mm.
right? I'm more interested in like, wow, in a year and a half, a lot of our rules changed, a lot of them. And when so many rules change, it's like when you have kids, right? If you let them eat ice cream every day, you can't go back after 3 months and be like, nah, you got to start eating vegetables, right? Ice cream's not part of that diet, right?
Mm.
So if they're going to eat vegetables, they're going to eat some ice cream too,
Mm.
right? So I don't know 100 years from now what this looks like, but I do know that things have changed.
Mm.
And I'm more interested in thinking about like, what are all the things that have changed, right? I think our relationship with the minister has changed. Our relationship with the building, the church building has changed.
Mm.
Our, yeah, I think those two things have changed. The relationship with the church building and the relationship with the minister. Those are two fundamental things that I don't think are going backwards.
Mm. Well, that's definitely something very profound to understand that, because now, you know, how we used to say the church is not the building, where the people are the church.
Right.
That's definitely something that's actually been tested in this time, because when you're having these Zoom churches or conference calls for having service, now it's no longer the building, now it's the people. So
Right.
we have to understand that it can't just be it just can't be simply, oh, the building is the church. No, the people are the church. But in this new era, we understand that our communication and our logging in to be able to have that type of fellowship is something that's very impactful, and that will stand the test of time. Buildings come and go, but the relationship of the people and the church is something that will always be there, from given from point, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I truly do respect what you're saying and see where you're coming from, Reverend Richards, and I appreciate you jumping on this as my guest. Truly been a blessing to have you share your thoughts and, let people know about you, because most people have this misconception when they see that title of pastor or reverend. They don't feel that you're approachable, and
Yeah.
they don't feel they can reach to you. And
Yeah.
so I just want you to, as we just close, I just want you to give your take on that, on that perspective of being a minister of the gospel or a pastor of a church. And do you feel that the people feel almost intimidated to talk to you in regards?
Yeah. I feel that absolutely when I was at Abyssinian, I felt um, that I would say you feel two things, right? Being a minister, like being a pastor, as a job, right? Like this is your job. You feel a deep sense of connection to people, right? So you do feel like people are close to you, right? Because you're involved in people's lives in such an intimate way, right? But there is a respect factor that sometimes borders on intimidation,
Mm,
right? So it's like how I respect my doctor. I do, right? Like I have a certain level of deference to what she is saying to me because she knows more about this than I do,
mm-hmm,
right? But I also feel enough like confidence to question her, right? If there's some things I don't understand, or maybe like I have a different opinion. So
mm,
if I think the respect that ministers are given is a good thing. It's how you respect a general, you respect a physician, right? You respect people in their profession, right? So I do feel like that's a positive thing. I think that what we have to like encourage is the fact that like you can respect me because I did go to school, I did study some of this stuff, right? I know something about what I'm talking about,
mm-hmm.
but you have an opinion that's valid too, right? And I want to know like your opinion, and so I feel like we have to I don't know if it's about like a hierarchy thing more than it is about like we have to figure out a way, and I think COVID has like sped up some of this to make people feel more comfortable, make non-ministers feel more comfortable with ministers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's really the case in every profession, right? And I'll bring up like medicine again. A lot of us don't ask questions of our doctors, right? We put them on this pedestal and we don't realize they're humans. They make mistakes. They don't think about everything clearly the way that they should, right? They're human beings. And so um, a minister is no more human than the next person,
Mm.
you know? And so I just feel like people need to understand that, you know? But I struggle with it in other professions, you know? We all struggle with um, maybe like not speaking up for ourselves, you know, and having opinions and stuff like that, or being comfortable expressing our opinions, you know. And so I think like we're on your show right now, so it's about ministers and people, but I think that we have the same issue with so many different professions in our society.
Well, listen, I truly appreciate that because I've asked a number of preachers and pastors this question, and of course, I always get different um, perspectives. And just as you're saying, uh, that ministers are humans too. They're not
Yeah,
above any laws or above God or anything in that situation, and that they are servants to the people, and that most people have this misconception that the people are meant to serve the minister or the pastor, but it's vice versa. You were called to serve God's people
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and share His gospel at the same time. But as we close, I just want you to leave us with some wise counsel, some encouragement word as we leave. And I appreciate you being my guest on this evening. And I'm gonna let you end it off on that note.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this show. I've watched a couple of your episodes actually, and I think it's a really, really, really great platform that you are creating here. So thank you for having me. And I think the wise or motivating words I would say is, I just feel like we are living in a very exciting time. I know that COVID is crazy. Trust me, I know, I know, I know. But it is an amazing experience to see so much of the world change so rapidly. And I feel really confident that God will see us through this, you know? And so um, I feel that this experience that we've been in together is one of those life-changing, life-altering experiences, that we were kind of coasting through. And, the ups and downs of the news cycle. But now, literally, everyone in the world is going through the same thing.
Mm.
We've never experienced that before, right? Because we haven't really lived through the great wars, right? And so to see that happening where it's like we're all going through something together is really fascinating to me. And I think that this experience has really just shown me like how much God will keep you, right, in the midst of so much craziness. Because
Mm.
we have worldwide craziness, but we eat every day. We have electricity. We are on video call. Like as crazy as things are right now, we're still really, really kept.
Mm.
And that's just been something that stuck out to me. So thank you again for having me, and I really just look forward to just seeing the growth of your platform. Thank you.
Well, appreciate you, Reverend Richards, and I so much am grateful to have you as a guest this evening. And I hope that God continues to bless you and your journey, uh, and that He may keep His hands of protection around you. And until next time, this is Talking with Pastor. Continue to let your light shine. God bless.
Thank you.